It froze?
No, I think we're good. Maybe. He's just switching to live.
Got a pep rally coming up this afternoon, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, a little parade.
Good. Now, what's that for? What are we celebrating?
Everybody who went to state athletes.
Yeah, winter sports, state athletes.
Very cool. Congratulations. I expect every one of you in that classroom qualifies. Is that right?
Yeah.
I'm such an athlete. Yes.
You actually belong to the team. You're all still athletes one way or the other, I suppose, right?
Sure.
He's talking about your camera.
I don't know what he says. It cut out.
I think he said you look nice.
Oh, thank you.
Just go with it. Nod your head
So
and say
should we
yes.
talk about the bill or that we like?
So I'll start us off, I guess. So Charlie, I had a list of 5 different bills that Jenna Jones kind of listed out for us that she said had some legs in this session.
Okay.
Yesterday we went through a couple of them, and there were 2 that I think stuck out.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but there was 2 that I think that stuck out for them. One of them was it looks like Senate Bill, 5356, concerning the humane treatment of dogs.
Yes.
And then the other one was the 5008 Real ID, having to do with the Real ID from the federal government. And that's the one that my other class is choosing to follow. And you guys obviously could do that as well. But I think part of our job today is to try and figure out which one of those we're interested in and which one we want to follow.
Okay. Well, that sounds good. So, did you guys take a vote on that, or have you guys discussed it among yourselves? Which one of those?
We discussed it, but we did not. We kind of ran out of time before the voting process. Do we want to do a little vote right now?
Yeah.
All right. So I'll count them up here. Everybody for the Humane Treatment of Dogs Bill 5356. Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 11. All right, the other one, the Real ID, has to do with enhanced driver's license from the federal government. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Yes, dog.
Yes, dogs! Looks like the dogs are the winners. So the Humane Treatment of Dogs won. We can't hear you.
I think he's muted.
We were just taking a look at 5356 quickly, and we're going to share it with the class, I believe, on the screen, so we can walk through kind of where the bill has been, what the testimony might have been in the committee hearing. The vote off the floor looks like it was 49 yes, 0 nays. So that one does have legs. Let's probably have to stay away from that pun on a dog bill, don't we?
Oh, there goes the camera.
Looks like it's
Oh.
sideways.
My fault.
Can you pull up the available documents?
It's because the cord's
Bottom of that.
Senate bill report.
Okay, back up. Just
They tried to look at like even pictures. You're not
okay, everybody. So, are they?
We're good.
So, what I asked David to do, he's our producer, the star producer of this program. I asked him to bring up a copy of the what's called the bill report, and this is the final bill report that was issued now that the bill has passed out of the Senate, and it is structured in a way where it describes what the bill does. It gives background on the statute itself, how the law is currently. Then a summary of what the bill does in terms of amending the current law. And what you see on your screen right now talks about that a tethering of a dog that violates the conditions for humane tethering, which they probably defined up above, is a separate offense, meaning that each time you tether the dog, you are committing a crime, and it's actually a civil infraction, so that's different than a crime, but you're breaking the law, so if you were to tether that dog 5 days out of 7, and somebody were to observe that and could prove that you had done it 5 days out of 7, you could be liable for tethering that dog or for the penalty of 5 times. Right? And then you see that appropriation line. It says none, so there's no cost to the state for doing this bill. For that Real ID bill that you guys were discussing, there is a significant cost because the State Department would have to go create a new license, and then there's everybody for doing that. So that's fiscal note.
You're kind of cutting out. We can't really hear.
Let me move
Do what?
my microphone. Is that better?
Yeah, that's
we
better.
can hear you now.
And then there was that section in there that talked about how the staff summary of the public testimony. So everybody liked this bill. It's a common way. It's a common sense way of structuring a citation related to inhumane dog testing. That because when you're looking at legislation and you're a senator or a representative that maybe didn't sit through that committee hearing, you get an idea of what the testimony was and then who testified for against it. So down at the bottom of that document, it's going to show you persons testifying. And here you have Senator Joe Fain, who's a senator from kind of the Auburn area, Auburn-Covington area of King County, just north of where you all live. And these couple of people, Erica Johnson from Animal Services and a guy named Don Murray, it looks like. Nobody testified against it, so it went out just fine. Dave, will you drop back off of this summary bill and go to the, let's see if there was a fiscal note that said fiscal note available. Okay, so down there, folks, this main website that he's at right now is the ledge.wa.gov website that, Andy, I assume you've kind of walked through this website with them so they know how to find a bill, find all the information about bills. Is that right?
We haven't yet, but we will. I know how to work it, but I haven't shown them.
Okay, that's great. So on that website, when you type in a bill number, it brings up all this information. Where we are now is on the fiscal note for the bill. And you'll see that the legislation does have impacts on cities and counties because of the X's that are there. And let's see, how much further down does this one? It tells the people who did the fiscal note, kind of gives a summary of the bill. And down at the bottom, it doesn't have revenue impacts for the state, but it indicates that there's going to be an indeterminate expenditure impact on cities and counties. Now, when you see something like that, maybe in this case, cities and counties don't think it's going to be all that expensive to enforce this law, but oftentimes if a city or a county has a revenue impact of some sort or an expenditure impact that they have to cover, they're going to go to the legislature and say, look, we're not going to do this. We're going to oppose this bill unless you help us fund the costs of implementing it or enforcing it. So these fiscal notes are really kind of an important part of the overall process as well, because it does give an indication of how much a great idea like might cost. So that's kind of a thumbnail sketch of what that bill is. It looks like it's pending in House Judiciary, and is it set up for a hearing? Scheduled for a hearing at 8 a.m. On the 15th. So, Andy, I don't know if you could get folks to watch that, or I guess maybe we could get a copy of the hearing and send it to you so that the students could watch it at your next.
Yeah, I think I want to plan on doing that next week at some point, and watch that. I just had a question. So about the fiscal impact.
Yeah.
You're saying sometimes cities would say we're going to oppose it until you give us money to do it. In this case, would cities just be for it just because this is an easier way for them to gain revenue from like citations?
It absolutely could be. Yeah, that's a really good point. Sometimes a city, whoa, sorry, I really have a hard time here, don't I? Sometimes a city will want to support a bill. Well, there are two reasons. Number one, who's against the humane treatment of dogs, right? So if you're a city representative, you're not going to get up and say, you know what, we just don't care about this issue. We don't care if dogs are being inhumanely tethered. You're just not going to do that. So there could be a situation where nobody testified against the bill, even though they have concerns about it, but they didn't want to get up in public and say so. So they might be working behind the scenes. That doesn't appear to be the case here because the bill did pass 49-0. But Andy, I think you're exactly right. If the cities feel as though the revenues that they can gain by a $50 fine or whatever it might be for inhumane tethering of a dog are going to cover the cost of having your animal enforcement officer out there, then they would be happy with the bill going through, because in the end, it's the right policy decision to make, right? I mean, oftentimes you really want to make sure that you're not opposing something that is just downright good statewide policy. So do you guys have questions about the bill at all, particular?
Is it only for dogs? Does the bill only apply to dogs or other animals as well?
That's a good question. When I look at the bill itself, we need to ask that the young man put on his foot off his desk, because it's not appropriate to sit like that. There we go. Good job. Okay, so back to it. Will you go to the bill?
What was that?
He's going to take them back to the bill, I think.
We're going to go back to the bill to answer the question. Only apply to dogs. So so you can see what the website looks like for 5356 here. If you go to available documents, and let's go all the way down to substitute bill. Obviously, they changed to the bill at some point. So that's what the bill looks like here.
You're still cutting out a little bit, Charlie. We hear about every other word.
Is that better?
I think so.
I wonder if maybe your wire is. Because I'm holding it right here in front of my. Can you hear me? Is it better now?
A little bit, kind of.
A little bit.
Reset your router.
Okay. I think they're just trying to make sure the wires are all connected. Is that better?
Yeah, I think so.
It sounds kind of
Turn it off, wait 30 seconds.
I don't think so.
Or try turning it off.
okay. All right, so let's go back to the bill structure. Can you hear me? Is this better now?
Yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Way.
So if you look at section 1, so here in section 1, it says new section down there on line 5. So that means there's a whole new section in law. And it does appear that this bill only applies to dogs because on line 7 it says any dog that is restrained outside by a tether must only be restrained for a period of time that is not reckless and in compliance with this section. The dog shall not be tethered in a manner that results or could reasonably result in the dog becoming frequently tangled on the restraint or another object. So here they're only talking about dogs. And then you see up there on line 1 where it says an act relating to the humane treatment of dogs. Because the title references only dogs, it appears to me that this could not apply to horses or any other animal other than dogs. So there's your answer.
Question, go ahead.
Can the bill like be changed to where it applies to other animals too?
We have to change the title, I think.
You could change it to apply to other animals. But there's only two ways to really do that. Number one, it's a Senate bill. So in the Senate, before they passed it off the floor of the Senate, they would have had to change the title of that bill. Remember back there on line 1, I showed you, it says an act relating to tethering of dogs. They would have had to change the title to say an act relating to the tethering of animals or dogs and cats or dogs and snakes and horses and rabbits and bears or whatever they might want to call it. So you would amend what they call amend the title or change the title. Since it says dogs, that's a pretty narrow title, so you couldn't do it. The other way you could do it is to introduce a separate bill with a broader title to have it apply to other animals. But that would require gathering new signatures, getting it dropped, and then because we have gone past a time frame where bills have to be moved out of their house of origin, all Senate bills out of the Senate and all House bills out of the House, you'd have to get it tied to the budget somehow. So you'd have to have a mechanism that says that the state's going to pay for this, and then you could bring a new bill into play. But at this point, it's going to be impossible to change the title on the bill or have it apply to anything other than dogs.
I mean, in terms of us choosing this bill, it seems kind of like I don't know, in terms of a shoe-in. There's not going to really be a whole lot of opposition. Would it be still worth our time to follow it and go through with it, or would the Real ID kind of be a more interesting topic because there might be some other things that might happen with it later on?
Let's take a quick look at the Real ID bill and find out what the vote count looked like on the Senate floor, and who testified for and against. An idea. How does that sound?
That sounds good. I like it. I think there were 5 senators against it. 6. I looked at it this morning. But
you remember the number on that one?
it is. I have it written.
What's the number?
5008.
5008. Okay.
Yeah, Senate Bill 5008. Yeah, so guys, we could do this right now on, go to this website, type it in, and you can follow how far it's gone in both either the House or the Senate. And I think this one is set up for a hearing next week as well.
It looks like there's 45 yes and 4 no's. So it also is going to have a better go of it. The interesting part of this one is that the issue, remember that first meeting that we all had, and I talked to you about federal government having this layer of bureaucracy, and then state government being the second layer of government, and you got local governments and jurisdictions that have different governments. The Real ID issue is an issue that crosses the federal and the state government jurisdictions, because federal law requires, after the 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security said, we have to get a better handle on the people that are coming into and out of our country and flying out of our country. So they made identification that truly showed whether the person was a citizen of the United States or where they're from, and hence the name Real ID, rather than what a lot of people think the state of Washington has, is a less secure form of ID, which could be fake ID. But the federal government said all the states have until 2017, I believe it is, to adopt a new form of ID where you have to show your birth certificate or a passport or something of that nature to prove who you are. And otherwise, they won't let you get onto airplanes, and it could really disrupt travel for a lot of Washingtonians. Certainly, if you were outside of the state of Washington, let's say you were in Chicago trying to board another plane, you had a layover in Chicago or something like that, without that kind of an ID, you could see your travel plans really disrupted. So the state of Washington kind of hemmed and hawed because, quite honestly, the state is very liberal in its willingness to give driver licenses to people who are not citizens of the state, but also who drive, so that they can get to and from work. And we don't judge whether they are citizens of the United States for the purposes of our driver license laws. So it's a pretty controversial issue in the sense that there's a lot of people who want to preserve the ability of people to be able to drive who might not be United States citizens. And then the countervailing argument from the federal government, Homeland Security, that you be able to prove that you are a United States citizen in order to get onto airplanes and travel from state to state. So what they did with this Real ID legislation was to find a middle ground, which was not easy. The ACLU even got in the middle of this, the American Civil Liberties Union. And they, excuse me, they essentially came up with an agreement that if you wanted to get this Real ID, you could, but they would have a separate driver license for those who could not prove citizenship but still wanted to be drivers. And the driver license for the Real ID has a red, I think it has some kind of a differentiating marker on it. I know mine has a red strip across the top, but it's a little different than Real ID. But it differentiates my driver license from just a regular driver license, in the sense that I've proven my birth here in the United States using my passport as well as my birth certificate. So I've proven, who I am and where I come from. So this is actually kind of a more interesting issue in terms of a better education as to how federal and state government and federal and state law interact with one another, and the countervailing desires by the majority of the people of Washington that we still allow non-documented citizens to be able to drive without fear of getting pulled over and not having a driver license. I mean, you know, there's a really big social argument that is part of this issue as well. So it's probably a better education for all of you, even though this sounds pretty darn boring. It is. It's a better issue in terms of a civics issue.
Well, I was just thinking because I know that my passport is gonna expire. I think they last 10 years, and it's gonna expire either this year or next year. So I'm gonna have to get make the decision: am I gonna get an enhanced license, or am I just gonna get a passport?
Staff and
Well, you'll
students,
probably
at this time, we would like the following state participants to meet between the 1200 and 1300 building. Girls basketball, girls bowling, cheer, and wrestling. We'll be dismissing the rest of the classes later, but at this time, will all state participants meet between the 1200 and 1300 buildings.
Oh, so now our time is getting short, isn't it?
Yeah. So everybody's leaving. I'm technically supposed to go over there, but I'll just join with them as they come by.
So Andy, I think you raised a good question. You will probably want to go ahead and get your real ID as soon as it becomes available, or right now just go get an enhanced driver's license, because you can do that. Currently, it's a little more expensive. It's about $90 to get one of those rather than $60 for a real ID. I know, isn't it crazy how expensive they are for a little piece of paper, right? Young woman in front. But you will still need your passport if you want to travel outside of Canada and Mexico from the United States. So, as I understand it, the real ID only allows you into and out of Canada and Mexico, and it allow you to fly throughout the United States without any problem. But if you wanted to go to Europe, you'd still need a passport of some sort. Andy, I really think this might be a good issue, because there's a nuance in this one where either by land or by sea or by air, you still need a passport for entry and exit from one of these countries. And so it might be an interesting exercise for all of you to kind of see the nuances of the statute and how it works, which kind of gives you maybe a little bit better idea of how complex some of the laws can get in terms of, hey, I've got my ID, why doesn't this work? Well, because the federal government said it can't work, and here's why. And so you have to have a passport anyway. So maybe by the end of the school year, all of you will be moved to go and apply for your passport just to have it in your back pocket.
All right. Sounds good. I think we'll plan to watch that hearing next week then, or take a look at a video of it or
That
something.
hearing is on March 16th.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. So let me know if you need any background or information, Andy. I'll be happy to get it together for you. I think that the bill as it's written right now is an agreed to bill. So you might want to look at the original bill and then the substitute bill and see where those differences are. I think a lot of it's in the cost of the license itself, so that we can kind of walk through how it moved from where it was to where it is today and how it'll get through the rest of the steps.
Okay. Sounds like a plan.
All righty.
Well, thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody.
You too.
You too. Have a good weekend.
Bye.